You are sitting at a dinner table right now. There is food in front of you. Maybe it is rice or bread or meat or something pulled from a package with a familiar logo on it. You know exactly what it is. You chose it. And somewhere, buried beneath that choice, is a system so old it predates language, predates cooking, predates the very idea of a meal. It is a system your ancestors built not with thought, but with survival. And the food they relied on most, the one that kept the human line alive across millions of years, is something that would make most people at your table push their plate away. It moved. It had 6 legs, and there were trillions of them. Everywhere, all the time. This is not a story about being gross. This is not a dare. This is the story of what your body was actually built to eat. Why ancient humans hunted insects with the same seriousness they hunted deer, and why the disgust you feel right now when you imagine biting into a beetle, that disgust is one of the youngest things about you. The real answer to why ancient humans ate insects is far stranger than hunger. It is a story about brains, about fat, about survival math, and about a biological inheritance you are still carrying whether you like it or not. Start with a number. Your brain is roughly 2% of your body weight, but it consumes 20% of your energy. Every single day. That is an absurd tax. No other organ demands that much. And the thing that makes a brain work, truly work, at the level that made humans human, is not glucose alone. It is fat. Specific fat. Long-chain polyunsaturated fatty acids, particularly DHA and arachidonic acid. These are the structural building blocks of neural tissue. Without them, your brain does not grow. It does not wire correctly. It does not become the thing that eventually looked up at the stars and started asking questions. Anthropologist and evolutionary biologist Dr. Mark Collard has spent years examining what early hominins actually ate based on fossil records, dental microwear, and isotope analysis. What the evidence consistently points to is a diet far more varied and far more opportunistic than the clean narrative of the noble hunter. Early humans ate what was available. They ate what gave the highest return for the lowest energy cost. And insects, it turns out, score extraordinarily high on that calculation. Think about the math for a moment. A single termite mound can house up to 3 million individual insects. One mound. It does not run away. It does not fight back with claws or hooves. It just sits there, packed with protein, packed with fat, packed with micronutrients that a developing hominid brain desperately needed. Hunting a wildebeest requires hours, sometimes days, of pursuit. It requires tools, coordination, risk of injury, and often ends in failure. Raiding a termite mound requires a stick and patience. The caloric return per unit of effort is not even close. This is what researchers call the optimal foraging theory. It was formalized by ecologists Eric Charnov and Gordon Orians in the 1960s and 1970s, and it essentially describes what every animal already knows intuitively. You eat what gives you the most energy for the least cost. Your brain did not invent this rule. Your ancestors lived it. And for most of human prehistory, insects sat very close to the top of that list. The evidence is not just theoretical. Primatologist Dr. Gilles Pruetz spent years studying chimpanzees in Senegal, observing behaviors that offer a window into what our shared ancestors may have done. What she documented was systematic, deliberate insect foraging. Chimpanzees use modified sticks to extract termites from mounds. They select specific tools. They remember which mounds are productive across seasons. This is not accident. This is strategy. And if our closest living relatives do it with this level of sophistication, the implication for early hominins is significant. But it goes back further than chimpanzees. Much further. Fossil evidence from Australopithecus sites, hominins who walked the African savanna over 2 million years ago, includes bone tools that researchers believe were used for termite extraction. Your line was eating insects before your line had stone tools, before your line had fire, before your line had anything resembling what you would call civilization. The insect came first. Now think about what this means for your body. If your ancestors ate insects consistently across millions of years, then your digestive system, your nutritional requirements, your very metabolic expectations were shaped by that food source. Insects are not a fringe food. They are not exotic. In the deepest biological sense, they are ancestral. They are what the machine was calibrated to run on. Consider the nutritional profile. A 100-gram serving of dried crickets contains roughly 60 to 70 grams of protein. That is more than beef, gram for gram. It contains all 9 essential amino acids. It contains more iron than spinach, more calcium than milk, more zinc than most grains. And it contains exactly the kinds of fats, the omega-3s, the long-chain fatty acids, that a growing brain needs to build itself. The ancient human who was eating termites and beetle larvae every day was not eating poverty food. They were eating a superfood so nutrient-dense that modern food scientists are now scrambling to bottle and sell it. You have been told a story about early human diets that centers on meat. The mammoth, the bison, the great hunt, and meat was certainly part of the story. But the hunt was unreliable. The hunt was dangerous. The hunt required a level of social coordination and physical capability that varied enormously across seasons, across geographies, across individual groups. Insects did not vary. They were everywhere, in the soil, in the bark, in the grass, in the air. They were the constant, reliable, calorie-dense background of the human diet that the dramatic story of the hunt has completely overshadowed. Dr. Julie Lesnick, a biological anthropologist at Wayne State University, has done some of the most detailed work on this subject. In her research on insect consumption across ancient hominins, she argues that insects were not a fallback food. They were a staple. She draws on everything from fossil records to ethnographic data from modern hunter-gatherer groups who still forage for insects today. And her conclusion is unambiguous. Insects were central, not peripheral. Look at what the modern world has preserved. There are still over 2 billion people on this planet who regularly eat insects as part of their normal diet. 2 billion. That is not a quirk. That is not a developing world food gap. That is the continuation of a practice so ancient it predates agriculture by millions of years. In Mexico, grasshoppers called chapulines have been eaten for thousands of years and remain a celebrated delicacy today. In Thailand, fried insects are sold on every street corner and eaten by children the way chips are eaten in England. In parts of Central Africa, the arrival of winged termites after the first rains is treated like a harvest festival. Everyone comes out to collect them, to roast them, to eat them fresh. This is not strange food culture. This is the oldest food culture on Earth, still running. Your disgust is the strange thing, not their dinner. Disgust as an emotion is extraordinarily young in evolutionary terms. Psychologist Paul Rosen at the University of Pennsylvania has spent decades studying disgust, and what he found fundamentally reframed how scientists think about it. Disgust is not a universal instinctive reaction to specific things. It is learned, it is culturally transmitted. Infants do not experience disgust at insects. Children under 2 years old will put almost anything in their mouths, bugs included, with no emotional reaction whatsoever. The disgust comes later. It is taught. It is absorbed from the faces and reactions of the adults around them, from the language used to describe certain foods, from the social architecture of what counts as acceptable and what counts as other. In cultures where insect eating is normalized, there is no disgust response to insects. The same biological humans, the same neurological hardware, the same emotional system, and no disgust. This tells you everything. The disgust is not in your body. It is in your culture. Your body, stripped of its cultural programming, has absolutely no problem with insects. It built itself on them. Think about how recently your food world changed. Agriculture is roughly 10,000 years old. That sounds old, but set it against 3 million years of hominid evolution, and it is nothing. It is the last fraction of a percent. The cultural shift that moved your ancestors from opportunistic foragers eating Everything available to settled farmers growing specific crops happened almost overnight in biological time. And with it came new food categories, new ideas about what was food and what was not. Insects, which had always just been food, began to be categorized differently. As Europe colonized and its food culture spread globally, the Western disgust for insect eating followed. It got exported. It got taught to places that had been eating insects without issue for thousands of years. And in some of those places, it stuck. But your genome did not get the memo. Your genes still carry the record of what your ancestors ate. When researchers study the gut microbiome of populations with high insect consumption, they find something interesting. Differences in microbial composition that suggest a longer evolutionary relationship with insect chitin, the fibrous shell material that makes up an insect's exoskeleton. Chitin acts as a prebiotic. It feeds specific beneficial bacteria in the gut. It promotes immune function. And humans, unlike many mammals, have chitinase enzymes specifically designed to break chitin down. You have a biological tool for digesting insects built into your body. You did not get that tool by accident. Now consider what happened to the human brain. The dramatic expansion of the human brain, the encephalization event that separated Homo sapiens from every other species, happened somewhere between 2 million and 300,000 years ago. Researchers have long puzzled over what drove it. What was the nutritional catalyst that allowed a primate brain to triple in size across a relatively short evolutionary window? The leading candidates consistently point to increased access to high-quality fat and protein. Shore-based foraging, shellfish, fish, has been one popular theory. But inland populations far from the coast also show the same trajectory of brain expansion. What was the inland equivalent of the shellfish? What gave them the fat, the protein, the DHA? Look at what was always there, everywhere, in impossible abundance. Look at what required no tools, no fire, no coordination to access. Look at what is 60 to 70% protein and packed with the exact fats a growing brain needs. The answer has 6 legs. Your brain is, in a very real sense, an insect-powered machine. The fuel that built it came from the ground, from mounds, from bark and soil, and rotting logs and tall grass. It came from the thing you now feel instinctive revulsion toward. That revulsion is the most modern thing about you. And your brain, the brain that generates it, is ancient. Here is the thing that should genuinely stop you. The insect that built your brain is now endangered in ways that matter. The global collapse of insect populations, described by entomologists as an insect apocalypse, is one of the least discussed and most consequential ecological crises of the modern world. Insect biomass is declining by 2 to 4% per year in many regions. 80% of flying insects in some parts of Europe have disappeared in the last 3 decades. The food system your ancient ancestors depended on, and that 2/3 of all species on Earth still depend on through pollination, decomposition, and food chain structure, is collapsing. And most humans are not paying attention because they have been taught that insects are not food. They are not even people. They are background noise. But they are not background noise. They are the foundation. They always were. Your ancestors understood this in the deepest possible way, not with language, not with science, but with the body's perfect ability to recognize what it needs. They followed the termites. They used sticks to pull grubs from bark. They collected caterpillars by the handful at the right time of year. They watched the sky for the moment the winged ants erupted from the ground after rain, and they moved toward that moment with everything they had, because they knew, not with thought but with biological certainty, that what was about to fall from the sky was energy. It was survival. It was the raw material of a brain still becoming human. There is a version of the future where this comes full circle. Insect agriculture, the controlled farming of crickets, mealworms, black soldier flies, is growing faster than almost any other sector of the food industry. It requires a fraction of the land, water, and feed of conventional livestock. It produces a fraction of the greenhouse gases. It creates a food product so nutritionally dense it rivals anything else on the market. And the people who study human nutrition, who look at the full arc of what humans have always eaten, are not surprised by this at all. They are watching the wheel turn back. You may never eat an insect willingly. That is fine. Your disgust is real, even if it is learned. But consider what it means that the most efficient, most nutritionally complete, most ecologically sustainable food source available to humans is also the oldest one. Consider what it means that your body built itself on something your culture taught you to reject. Consider that the gap between what your biology expects and what your plate contains is one of the defining tensions of modern human life, and that it shows up in places as strange and as small as the face you make when someone mentions eating a cricket. The dinner table you sat down at tonight is 10,000 years old at most. The body sitting at it is millions of years older. And somewhere in the gap between those two timelines, the insect sits quietly, exactly where it always has been, waiting, abundant, nutritionally perfect, and completely misunderstood. Just like it was the night your ancestor reached into the dark of a termite mound, pulled out something small and alive, and ate it without thinking. Because thinking had not been invented yet. The brain that would eventually do the thinking was still being built. And the insect was what was building it.